Earlier this week, I was coaching with a woman who needed to have a difficult conversation with a teammate. And the issue was in her mind that he wasn't getting work done that she needed him to do. And worse than that, instead of getting the work done she needed, he was actually jumping into her lane and doing some of her work. So she was very frustrated about this. Now, she tends to be a very fast paced, very task oriented person. And in the DISC model, that's a high D, very demanding, very decisive. So, as luck would have it, her teammate is an S, which in the DISC model is the opposite. It's very slow paced and people oriented. So, literally the opposites. So I said, well, how do you think you might approach this conversation? And she said, well, I'm going to do it like I usually do. I'm going to call up and go, hey, you're in my lane, get back in your lane, get your work done, and stop doing my work. I said, okay, that is a very D approach to that conversation. And how do you think that's going to go? And she said, well, he's going to say, oh, you're always so mean to me. And it sounds like you don't think I know what I'm doing. And you always think you're the boss of me. And you're really rude. And he might say some of those things. He's certainly going to be thinking those things. It's just like every other time. I said, okay, well, great. Those are just the things I wanted to hear because we're going to try something here. We're going to try a concept called an accusation audit. And it comes from this book, which is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And there's a ton of great, great techniques and concepts in this book. And if you haven't read it, please go get it and read it. If you have read it, please go read it again because it's great. So in the accusation audit, the idea is that you think ahead, like she had done, as to what the other person might think of you when you give them the information you need to give them or have the conversation you want to have. And before they can accuse you of those things, you accuse yourself. So we practice going into the conversation by saying, hey, listen, I need to talk to you about some stuff. But before I do, I want you to know that it might sound like I'm kind of being rude. It might sound like I think I'm the boss of you, or that I don't think you know what you're doing. And it might even sound a little bit rude. And that's not my intent. So what's happening though is, and then you go into what you need. Like, hey, you're doing my work. I need you to do your work, whatever. So why does this work? Well, it works in part because it signals to the other person that you're putting yourself in their shoes, that you want to understand how you might be perceived and kind of preemptively eliminate that, or at least call it out and get it on the table. Listen, I get it. I know how sometimes I come across. That's not my intent. These are obstacles to the success of our conversation. Can we put them aside and not focus on these things so we can focus on the issue? So you're not looking to win the conversation like I get my way, I win, you lose. You're looking to win in that communication takes place and resolution takes place and we move forward. That's the win. And the concepts in Never Split the Difference are all in service of a better conversation, healthier relationships. So in this case, as an accusation audit, you're signaling, I get it. I get how I come across. I get how this might sound to you. And I want to diffuse that before we talk about what's really on my mind. And in this case, specifically with that D and S in the DISC, where they're the opposite and the D is perceived as very task-oriented and very much about, I don't care about anyone's feelings, I just want it done, which is kind of how she tends to think. The S over here is thinking like, but what about us and our relationship? And you don't care about people. Well, by having an accusation audit where you say, hey, this might sound like I'm kind of a jerk. This might sound like I think I'm the boss of you. You're signaling that, hey, listen, I value our relationship. I do. I want to get along with you. I want to have a good working relationship. And I understand that the way I come across sometimes can be an obstacle. So can we set that aside in the service of having a productive conversation about this very serious issue? I'm having a legitimate issue that I want to talk about. I just don't want how I come across and your perception of me and these other things to get in the way. So let me just call them out right now. Well, then once you start that conversation, what's the other person going to say? Like, wow, you're being really rude. I know. I said you might think that. Well, it seems like you think you're the boss of me. I know. That's why I said that, because I thought you might think that. See, I put myself in your shoes so that we can get aligned and have a productive conversation. And that works with everybody. It works specifically well with people on the people side of the DISC model, the I's and the S's, especially if you're a D or a C who tend to be very task-oriented and perceived as not caring about people. Of course you care about people. You know that's how things get done. And of course, I's and S's care about getting things done. It's just their focus tends to be people, and D's and C's focus tends to be the tasks. So it's a way of coming together to say, hey, let's not let how we come across to each other may be an obstacle to healthy communication. So how did it all work out? Well, the next day I called her up, and it was a video call. So I could see on her face it had gone well. I said, it looks like it went well. Tell me about it. And she said, oh, it was the best conversation I've ever had with this person. It went better than I could have expected. I did it just like we practiced. I accused myself of all those things. And then I said, but I am having a problem with you. And he said, yes, I totally get it. And I can see where it would feel like I was in your lane. And I don't want that to be the case. And I know I have work to do that I need to get done. And I'm not trying to butt in. I'm just trying to be helpful. I so appreciate you bringing this up. And she said it was just wonderful. It was just a great conversation. It was clear that she had successfully put herself in his shoes in a way that he could relax, let his guard down a little bit, and really hear her for what she was saying to him. And then he volunteered, like, yes, I want to change. I want to do what you want. I want the tasks to get done the right way, but I also want to value our relationship. And I appreciate you valuing our relationship enough to make this call. So the next time you've got a difficult conversation, consider an accusation audit. These are people, relationship skills. These are not necessarily just business or work skills. So before you have to have a difficult conversation with a child, a parent, a spouse, some other family member, or a friend, or even someone at work, consider accusing yourself. Think through what they might think, how they might feel, and then accuse yourself of that before they can accuse you, so that it can get set aside, so that you can have the successful conversation that you need to have, and have the difficult conversation, but keep the relationship intact and move it forward.